and welcome to week 9 of the C.S. Lewis Mere Christianity. And so brought to you this week from Oceanell, North Carolina. And so I hope this works well. Everyone see that okay?
Great.
That showing up?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I did a little looking for some more interesting facts about Lewis. And here's what I found this time. Lewis destroyed the first version of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which was his first Chronicles of Narnia story. Prior to 1947, he wrote a draft with 4 children named Anne, Martin, Rose, and Peter. The reaction of his friends to the story was discouraging, to say the least. He said in a letter, "It was by unanimous verdict of my friends so bad that I destroyed it." So he actually destroyed the first version of the Chronicles of Narnia that he wrote. And I think his friends were Tolkien, Dyson, the Inklings. I'm not sure of that, but I think that's true. So I'm glad he rewrote it.
Me too.
We are tonight doing chapters 6 through 8 of book 4. So we just have one more week after this. The chapters are 2 notes. Next chapter is Let's Pretend, or as Lulu would say, Let's Pretend. And third is Christianity hard or easy? So especially in this first chapter, I really kind of glossed over some. So if I gloss over something that you want to talk about, ask a question or say something you read that you liked, as usual, say anything like that. In book 4, Lewis liked to get letters. He would get letters from critics and people that had questions or criticism about what he said, and he would usually answer them. And quite often he would incorporate those answers in his writings. And so one critic asked of this chapter, if you remember back, if God wanted sons instead of toy soldiers, why didn't God beget many sons from the start? So last week we talked about obstinate toy soldiers, that we're kind of natural obstinate people, and God is trying to pull us into being fully what he means us to be. So that was one. The second issue was, are we really separate beings, souls and children of God, or are we parts of one common organism, which is more important? So it was kind of part of that, and I really abbreviated what's said in the book. It's kind of part of that thing about, are we becoming more individual, or are we like some of the Eastern religions? Are we becoming one part of one great spirit in God? So from your memory or your opinion, what are some of the possible answers to this? Why didn't God just make many sons instead of just one Jesus, the way it worked?
Well, I feel that because of our free will, we remain separate beings that have the capacity to act on God in us. But just as he says, the toy soldier might not want to be anything but 10.
Right. We
often make that the lesser choice. And I'm convinced that the more we trust God to shape us, the more individual we get in our godliness.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I kind of like being 10 a lot.
Yes. Yeah. And also it had to do with I think God, and Lewis talked about God doing it the way he did to develop a relationship with us, not just make us something that would blindly follow God all the time. And so Lewis said a couple things. He said, the Father's relation to the Son is not the same as the Son's relation to the Father. This is addressing that first point. Why didn't he make many sons? If there were several sons, they would all be really related to one another and to the Father in the same way. How would they differ from one another? And if you remember this chapter, I didn't put a lot of that on there. He went about what makes something individual, what differentiates one thing from another. And even if you have 10 pennies, they all differ because they occupy different spaces and different times, different places. And as Lewis took us through last week, God doesn't occupy time and space that way. So that's one kind of esoteric explanation. The second thing he said, the whole human race is, in a sense, one huge organism, like a tree. Human individuals are not as mere members of a group or items in a list, but are organs of in a body, different from one another, and each contributing what no one other could. What are your thoughts and comments if you remember back to that chapter? It was kind of a very abstract chapter, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on that one. The next two chapters, I think, are a little more understanding in the Christian doctrines.
Well, I'm just glad that that is our situation. I don't think we tap into that as much as would be beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tom, I don't want to wander too far afield, so pull me back as you feel appropriate. But I've been musing on your question about more sons and daughters. And if we deeply believe that we are born with God within us, God is within each of us and is active in our lives, does that allow for the simple idea that, in fact, God speaks through many of us?
Yes. And also the point, yes. And also the point that God can give me and you and everyone on the screen, God can give God's undivided attention, because God is not limited in the time and space we are. And if you think about your best friend, if you think about some experience you had, you can dwell on it. You can dwell on your relationship with someone you love in your mind and get some idea of what God can do. Mm-hmm. And it is a great gift, if that answers the question.
What I was feeling is that, and I think the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints places a lot of emphasis on prophets, modern day prophets.
Yes.
But, there are times when I listen to preachers of all faith traditions, and I listen to things that they say, and I frequently think, I'm supposed to hear this. I'm supposed to listen carefully to this.
Yeah.
When each of you talk to me, I think God is actively talking through all of us. And that's the great challenge of discernment that each of us faces. Just my thought.
Yeah. Our separateness, our uniqueness, our individuality is really important to God, but God is trying to pull us into one family.
Yes.
His family, God's family. All right. If there's anything else you want to contribute, please do. Let's see. So that was chapter 6. Chapter 7 is called Let's Pretend. And we hinted at this last week about what it is that God does. What is the process that God has chosen that helps to change us into what we are meant to be. And so he calls this chapter, Let's Pretend. He says, up to now, I have been describing what God is and what he has done. Now, I want to talk about practice. What do we do next? And then he told a story. He says, recall the story of Beauty and the Beast and the story of a person who wore a mask to make him better looking than he really was. Eventually, by wearing this mask, his face had grown to fit the mask. What was Lewis talking about?
The man lived into a new reality. He went in wearing the mask, he acted more like, and it said he was good looking. He acted more like a good looking, confident, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of what people do online now, which can be very destructive, but also it can allow people to shed their, I don't know, their appearance, their shyness or whatever. And in some respects, I think being online can allow people to be more who they are and speak out without the negative feedback that often hinders people. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So, and I asked Shannon, who's a literature expert, if there was a story she could think of about a person wearing a mask to make him or herself look better, and after wearing it for so long, they took the mask off and they actually looked like the mask. That it helped, and she couldn't think of a story. The only story I could think of is kind of the reverse, as a Twilight Zone, where these 5 relatives were after this old dying man's money, and they just couldn't wait for him to die. And he said, okay. He said, I invite you out of my house, and I have only one thing. You have to wear these masks until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning from midnight. And then you get your inheritance. And they all had some thing about them that was kind of selfish or boring or mean. And so each of their masks was kind of a contorted looking face. But because they wanted the money, they all said, fine, we'll do it. And they all put the masks on. And then the old man died. And then morning came and they said, well, thank God he's dead. You know, Rod Serling, I think, wrote this one. Thank God he's dead. He says, now we can get the money and we can take these darn masks off. And one at a time, they took the masks off and they came and their faces looked like the mask permanently, like with a big frown or a sneer or, it was, so this is kind of, Lewis was telling us, is kind of in reverse. You can also pretend and put on a positive persona and you can grow into it. That's what I'm reading from this. What do you think?
I feel that way a little bit when I'm speaking my second language, even though it's still me. It's like I'm confronting and experiencing the world as a different person almost.
Yeah. Yeah. It's freeing if you do it for the right reasons, I guess I would add.
Yeah.
Okay. Lewis says, when we become interested enough to, and so now he's saying, this is continuing on, what do we do now? Now, God told us what we are. Now, what do we do? And so one of the things is prayer. And he said, when we become interested enough in Christianity to take a shot at saying prayers, Christians often begin with the Lord's Prayer. The very first words are, Our Father. And he says, do you see what those words mean? They mean, quite frankly, that you are putting yourself in the place of a son of God or a daughter of God. To put it bluntly, you are dressing up as Christ. Lewis said, we, in a way, are pretending. What is the good of pretending to be what you or we are not?
I think we try on
we try on new ways of thinking and being, and um, and then discovering things about ourselves that are otherwise hidden to us and hidden to others. And I think in trying some of those new things, maybe others see some of our hidden parts as well and bring those out too.
Yeah.
You know, it isn't always fake. It's probably like Lucy was saying, or a second language, you know, you feel kind of fake saying it, but you gotta work through that to feel some confidence and some consistency with the learning. And I think that's the way it is with our faith, is that it isn't always just boom, you've got it,
Right.
but it's a day-to-day process.
Well, what if, as we are, in his verbiage, pretending, we're really more of our real selves if we are pretending to choose what Jesus would choose for us? Then I feel like we're being much more of our truly real selves.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we pretend, I mean, it's almost natural the older we get. Like Lulu's an age where she's just herself. She'll say whatever she comes onto her mind. But we quickly learn in our culture what to say, what not to say, sometimes to hide our feelings a little bit. My parents said when, you know, all four of us boys, if we go over to so-and-so's house and they offer you something to eat, don't take it, you know. And I still can't figure out exactly why that is, but they, and so you kind of almost are being taught to be put off, to be off-putting or something. And the way we teach kids not to trust strangers. So there's a lot of things we do for good reasons that limit our potential or our humanness sometimes. And so God is saying, you know, when you pray, say our Father. And did you ever have a friend, or did it ever happen to you where you were had a good time with some close friend or some family, and they said, you know, you're just like a second daughter to me. You're just like a son to me. And how does that make you feel? Is that a kind of similar thing?
I think
What do
it
you
is.
want to do the next time you see that person?
You want to be with them.
You want to be good. You want
Yeah.
to be with them. Yeah.
You want to live up to that expectation or that quality they seem to see in you.
I want to say I didn't like reading this chapter, and I did not like his comment about we are dressing up as Christ, because whenever I say the Our Father, I feel when I say our Father, my Father, I think of myself as a child of his, looking for guidance, looking for direction, looking for all the things that we look to God for. And I never thought of it this way, that I was dressing up, pretending to be.
Yeah, I don't like the verbiage pretending at all.
No.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's a little bit startling. I will
But-
say,
do I.
But a lot of,
If you substitute the word practicing,
right.
then I think that is more of what he is meaning. I mean, little kids pretend to play a house, like they're making something in the kitchen. They're not really doing it, and they can't do all of what it takes to make something, but they're pretending it. They see the examples that are made by their parents and how they do things. And it isn't fake, it's just living by example. And the example that I think Christ has offered is this prayer, Our Father.
Yeah.
And it's not my Father, it's our Father. And so we're included in on that.
Yeah, pretending is not the best word. I don't know if there is a better word. Let me read these two paragraphs a little further on the next page. Not in my slides. He says, this is why children's games are important. They're always pretending to be grown-ups, playing soldiers, playing shop, but all the time they're hardening their muscles and sharpening their wits so that the pretense of being grown up helps them grow up in earnest. Now, the moment you realize, here I am dressing up as Christ, it is extremely likely you will see at once some way in which at that very moment, the pretense could be made less of a pretense and more of a reality. You will find several things going on in your mind, which would not be going on there if you were really a son of God. That's his explanation, and I just put that out there.
I feel like it does me more good, honestly, to say, I would, if I did take the time to stop and say, I would like to do this, but I have a voice that is suggesting that that's not the best thing for me to do. Instead, to push through and just don't do that. I much rather would think that I'm listening to God's guidance instead of and living into my true self instead of pretending.
Right. But this is, like Mary said, this is emphasizing the practice part. Like, think of it as sport. The first time I played soccer or baseball, I looked up to the guys that really could play, right? I couldn't for the life of me, do that. But I watched them, and kids do this all the time in sports. They try to mimic the qualities of the good athletes they think they see. And probably music is similar. But that's more of the thought than just putting on a pretense. It's, I really want to be like that. Maybe I could be like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I need to try.
Yeah, I understand the idea of practicing.
Mm-hmm. That's a better word.
I think, like he said, like you just read, Tom, the difference is pretending implies it's not real, but practicing implies that it is real.
Yeah. Or could be. Yeah.
Or mimicking.
Yeah. So Lewis goes on, you see what is happening. The Christ himself, the Son of God, who is man just like you, and God just like his Father, is actually at your side and is already at that moment beginning to turn your pretense into reality. You are no longer thinking simply about right and wrong. You are trying to catch the good infection from a person. It is more like painting a portrait than obeying a set of rules. And the odd thing is that while in one sense it is much harder than keeping rules, in another way, it is far easier. My question is, do you agree or disagree, and why?
Yeah, I really totally agree. And I would use the word, I hope I'm saying it correctly, of modeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The good people that are around me, and I think I need to be more like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I choose to believe, that that's what he would have me do, is look at the people of quality around me and look at how they behave and look at what they do and how they approach problems. And when they're confronted with somebody who just beats them over the head with their opinions, do they turn around and beat them over the head back, or do they somehow come back in a Christ-like way? I think, gosh, I wish I could do that. I wish I could be more that way.
And by wishing and wishing and trying, you become more that way.
I believe that. And, we've all, earlier, as you were talking and I was thinking, we've all put to rest that statement, fake it till you make it. And that sounds so shallow.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an element of it that I think is right. I think is true. It's not that you're faking it. It's that you're behaving the way you want to behave.
Yeah.
Though it may not yet be who you are.
And a good teacher will say, you can't do it now, but I have faith. You keep doing it and you'll get it. I had a good
Well-
swimming coach that told me that about swimming butterfly. I could not get it. Then once I got it, I never lost it.
Yay.
And again, isn't it, try, if at first you don't succeed, try again.
Right.
And so there are many times when we fall and fail, but we must continue to rise up and continue trying. And it's not easy. It's often not easy,
No.
but it's important to do so. And I don't think we do it all alone. We do it in community. And,
Right. Yeah.
um,
Lucy used a language parallel earlier, and I may have read more into it than she intended, but as you learn to speak a second language, particularly when you're a bit older, a good friend who is helping me remarked about this characteristic that he terms bloqué. You're blocked. You can't get it out because you're afraid to make mistakes. You're afraid to just speak. You're afraid to fake it until you make it. And his attitude is talk. If you want to talk, just talk. Well, I don't know how to say those things. Yes, you do.
right.
I don't know how to be a good Christian. Yes, you do. Just be one. Do
Yeah.
the things that you know that you should do
Yeah.
until you become that person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is even in relationships, for fear of telling people what you think or how you care about them, for fear of rejection, or in, being kind, or, you blunder into stuff.
Oh, yeah. I'm good at blundering.
Yeah.
Me too.
So were the 12 disciples. I mean,
Yes,
it reminds
absolutely.
me of the parables that Jesus told the disciples. And he said, the good man or the kingdom of heaven is like this. If you do these kinds of things, you are in the kingdom of heaven. And if you don't, you're not getting there. I mean, a little different, but they were the disciples often misunderstood to start with.
Yeah. Well, we study under probably one of the best master blunderers I've ever met. If we could be more like Bill in terms of who his core personality is,
Master
you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Before I leave this slide, I personally like the analogy that it's more like painting a portrait than obeying a set of rules. Obeying a set of rules is administrative. Painting a portrait is trying to incorporate a character or incorporate a style and a whole character of something that's not easy to verbalize. I mean, you can keep all the rules you want, but if you don't want to become Christ-like, you probably won't.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of like that way he put that. The real Son of God is at your side. He's beginning to turn you into the same kind of thing as himself. He's beginning to, so to speak, to inject his kind of life and thought, his Zoe, into you, to turn the tin soldier into a live person. And now we begin to see what it is that the New Testament is always talking about: being born again, putting on Christ, Christ being formed in us and through us, about our coming to have the mind of Christ, etc. What do you think? Does that help you? And Lewis will always say, if this doesn't help you, forget it. This is the way he saw it. The way he came up with analogies for himself.
Well, I do think that God is always reaching out to us and wanting us to be his own, and uh, wants us to be who he has created us to be, the best we can be. It sounds like the Marines, but that's not.
Yeah.
But being our true selves, and peeling the onion, getting the outer layers off and getting to the core of us. uh i i, I see that. I see that always being reached towards, you know engaging, loving, caring, and him asking that of us as well, to be that.
I want to ask, does he reach out to all of us at the same time? Because I feel like some people in my world have more Zoe than me, and it's like their journey with him and being injected started way before, it started for me. So it's just a question, does he treat all of us the same at the same time, or why is it that some people have it sooner? Does that make sense? I'm not sure I'm saying.
It's almost like why didn't he just do many Christ? Let there be some Christ figure right next to all of us all the time, and everyone will be at the same thing at the same time. And so I think no, I think Lewis said when he doubted God the most is when he felt like God was closest. That's kind of a paradoxical thing, but he has said that because he finally sort of emptied himself, said, I don't know this. I want to know this. I want to have the good infection. And he had to let down his guard. And I just don't think that happens the same to everybody at the same time.
Alice, I think the question you ask is a profound question. And part of the answer, I think, is in a poem that a lot of people here, maybe everybody here, may have read. It's called Footprints in the Sand.
Yep.
I believe that he is with you all the time. He has been with you from the beginning. Let me not talk about you. Let me talk about me. Sometimes I choose to listen to him, and sometimes I just take a right turn and I walk away. Who knows why? Sometimes I think he's developing me, and other times I think I'm ignoring him. He's working with every single one of us all the time. And I speak for me and say, you have been a blessing to me in a lot of ways. You have made me think about things. And you have helped me discern things. And so I could argue that he has spoken through you in a number of ways. We cannot talk here about things that you've shared with us that opened my eyes and made me think. And those were gifts, and I choose to believe that they are gifts from him, her, and you. God was working through you and acting out through you for our benefit. I choose to believe that.
See if this helps. I think there's some of your question here, maybe. This is about practice and habits. We begin to notice, besides our particular sinful acts, our sinfulness. We began to be alarmed not only about what we do, but about what we are. Lewis says, I've been talking as if it were we who did everything. In reality, of course, it is God who does everything. We, at most, allow it to be done to us. In a sense, you might even say it is God who does the pretending. Does that make you think?
Thanks be to God that he's infinitely patient.
Yeah. I just don't see how this would happen the same to everyone. We all had different
Yeah,
experiences, you know. But I think we can be open. I think we have to be open to allow God to work, which, like the obstinate toy soldier, a lot of us don't want to do that. We already think we got everything kind of in hand.
I am so thankful for what you just said, Carl, to Alice. And I'm hoping to take that in too, because what it reminds me of is I want to follow Christ, and I see a witness in so many others. And there are times, though, that I will compare myself rather than asking the Lord, well, show me what they're witnessing about you that you're teaching me. And that's surrendering to dying to self and living in Christ. And I know there was one example years when David was in high school and he had a Bible study at our house. And gosh, I wasn't even anywhere close to walking with the Lord, much less thinking about him when I was that same age. And I thought, gosh, they're so much further along than I am. And the Lord helped me see, no, I'm meeting them in their souls and transforming them as I'm transforming you. And it helps me to have grace with myself, because I am so prone to compare rather than to ask the Lord, what are you showing me? Like he shows me so much in you, Alice, that I'm so grateful to the Lord for.
I agree.
Victoria, say that same thing again. Grace in yourself.
Yes.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, I can turn Christianity into a work because I like order. The Lord has wired me to like order. I like to follow the rules. I like to do what's right. But often I will put the work of that ahead of receiving his grace and his love as he transforms me into his likeness. And it's such a joy when that happens, to get to know myself through his eyes and not mine, in the moments that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lewis went on the next paragraph or two and said, and a lot of people are quote unquote carriers of Christ that don't even know it. I mean, there are people who have a spirit about them. I think, Alice, you're talking about this a little bit, and we feel it, we know it, but they may not even know. Lewis says this good infection can be carried by those who don't even know that they have it themselves. And he said we must be thankful of everyone who crosses our paths that help us recognize it in ourselves. Yeah, he did, I think, make it really important that we recognize each other's influence and people that have been in our lives that have shared with us. All right, let's book 4. This is the last chapter for tonight. Is Christianity hard or easy? To become a real son or daughter of God, we first admit there must be something more than our natural desires and feelings, something more than ordinary morality and being good. And recall back when we talked about the difference between feelings and your will. Your feelings can be all over the map, from day to day. Your will is your training. I feel like Lewis is saying we're training our will to be in connection with God. So then he says, we are hoping that when all the demands have been met, the poor natural self will still have some chance to get on with its own life and do what it likes. Why does Lewis conclude this won't work for him? And do you agree?
But well, as a Christian, I should not want my own life. I'm just very, very aware of the missed blessings and opportunities because I am too busy, too caught up in myself.
Mhm.
You know, all God wants is for me to get as much blessing as I can get.
Mhm. Yeah.
We need to get, and let me appeal to Kat for a moment. And Kat, you be real honest and blunt. And I know you will be. We need to get somebody like Tom to do chapter 7, the way Tom's doing Mere Christianity.
I'm sure we could all get a good dose of that.
Chapter 7 in the Rule of Benedict is on humility.
Hmm.
And the whole Benedictine, if there is a creed that is a reflection, is on humility. And I think Christ, more than anything else, and Benedict thought Christ, I think, believed more than anything else, that we need to be humble people. And the magic of Benedictine humility is that if you move to aspire to that condition, you basically aspire to be godlike. That is to say, God and Christ were the ultimate with respect to humility.
Yeah, and maybe we find that we can stop trying to prove ourselves to everyone around us who don't necessarily have our best interests at heart, but
Right.
we still
Right.
feel that competition, right?
And that's you've basically taken a big piece of humility right there. That's, you don't have to prove yourself to anybody.
Right.
God knows who you are.
And that's hard to do. That's hard to
Oh,
get that
yes.
mindset.
You want to justify yourself at every word, at every turn.
And
Yeah.
it's next to impossible in your 20s and 30s. I think it takes sort of a lifetime of living and wisdom and maturity till you can get to that place.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why what Alice said was so on point. He's been working with you, Alice. You are a fine piece of work. And he's been working on you for a long, long time.
I am a real piece of work, that's for sure.
Wow.
We
We're
all
all-
are.
We're all
Yeah.
a piece of work, right?
That's right. That's right.
I think there are stumbling blocks that we put in front of ourselves that block us away from. I'll speak for myself. The stumbling blocks that are put in, that I have put up in front of me to see where God has moved in my life. I try to see those, but I'm not always thinking that I need to step around them to see where God is. I think that lots of times I can do it sufficiently on my own. You know, it's a simple life. And so why bother God? You know,
Well-
with some of the silly, stupid things that need, you know, attending to. But it's my own sense of false pride that I can do them myself. And God is saying, well, you know, all your life is mine. It's yours, but it's mostly mine.
Do you think you put the obstacles in place, Mary, or do you think God does to help you learn and grow?
I think that I do. I think I do. I think, and there are some natural obstacles that come just by being in a family, you know, or situations that hurt you and or me that are hard to overcome, and and they're just hard to reconcile. And you know, I think God is right there with us to work those out. And they just come from being, you know, living creatures, is my thinking. Um,
I particularly liked way a few chapters back his analogy of writing the novel, and as you write about a character, 3 hours may pass, but what is written happens as you read it instantly.
Mhm.
And I did really love to expand my thoughts about God to, whatever I am receiving, allowing, grasping is just in perfect time. It's not late or early, it's perfect time.
Yes. Yeah. I think when you think of it, when you're there, that moment, it is perfect time.
I think, Tom, I defer to you entirely whether or not you would like the group to do this, but Alice has asked a wonderful question, and that is, does God put stumbling blocks in our way?
Hmm.
And I'm gonna tell you, Alice, what I believe. I believe that God does not do anything actively to hinder you. But also God gave you free will, which means that you've got to work some stuff out for yourself. But I believe, as Benedict teaches, do not begin any task without saying, God, would you come work with me on this one? Would you be with me as I take this on? And as you begin the task, when you hit something that's tough, I mentally look over and say, I need some help. Give me some insight here. And what happens to me when I do that well, I calm down. I get calmer. And what happens to us when we get calmer? I believe we think more clearly. And was God riding in the jump seat with Sully when he landed that plane in the Hudson?
Yeah.
I want to think he was. Have you ever seen anybody act as calm as he did
Right.
in a moment when everybody was going to die? I mean, it was a done deal. They were already sending out the funeral announcements, and he said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to put this plane down here. And he was as calm as could be.
Here's
And
a
I
question.
think,
Here's
I'm
a
sorry.
question. Did the teacher who taught that pilot how to fly so well, did the teacher put stumbling blocks in front of that
Yeah,
pilot?
there's no doubt that I believe that he made the pilot learn how to
Yeah.
deal with difficult situations.
But,
Because they
but I
do.
don't think I don't think he would describe what he did for that man as putting stumbling blocks in front of him.
No,
The stumbling block means I want you to fall down,
right.
right?
But and
don't-
and along with that, if I may, that there's a saying that God takes the stumbling blocks and turns them into stepping stones. So he's redeeming what happens at all times. And it does say in scripture that he does not tempt us and to do wrong and purposely make us fall, but he is also disciplining us as a father, as a loving father, and showing us the error of our ways. And then when that comes, hopefully and prayerfully, we have teachable hearts. And I think C.S. Lewis certainly believes in the Trinity, but I just have to also say, thank God for the Holy Spirit in us, who's showing us what he's doing in our lives.
Mhm.
Lewis says, I'm sorry. In the end, with all this practice and stuff, in the end, you will either give up trying to be good. If you're just trying to keep rules, I think he's saying here. In the end, you will either give up trying to be good or else become one of those people who, as they say, live for others, but always in a discontented, grumbling way, always wondering why others don't notice it more, and always making a martyr out of oneself. Christ says, give me all. I don't want so much of your time and so much of your money and so much of your work. I want you.
Yeah.
Not come to torment your natural self, but to kill it.
Mm-hmm.
No half measures are any good. That sounds severe.
I think our children would say the same thing of us.
Mm-hmm.
They want us and our time.
Mhm.
And well, yeah. I say I don't want so much of your time. They do want our time. They want us, and not so much of our work and our money as much as they value us more.
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
Yes, and not. I mean, in working with youth, a lot of adults thought that other teenagers didn't need them, and that was when they needed them the most.
Yeah.
Because there were some hard questions and hard situations that were coming up that they needed the security of knowing that their parents were around to help them navigate these treacherous waters. And uh, you just can't throw up your hands and say you're on your own. And I think that God doesn't do that. God doesn't say you're on your own. You've got free will. Go ahead and do whatever you want. And I got your back. God says we're going to do this together.
But you need to trust me. You need to give me you.
Mm-hmm.
And the first part rings true to me. I have a family member who I love dearly. That family member always kept every rule, every social convention, everything. Said, I worked my fingers to the bone. I followed all the rules, and I just didn't get enough recognition. And I have to just, listen and try and be understanding of that point of view. But I have felt that before. Well, I followed all the rules. I've done everything I was supposed to do, and no one seems to notice. And if you go into anything, especially a Christian faith, with that view, you're going to become miserable. And I think there are people who become miserable of their Christianity because they see it as just trying to perfectly keep a bunch of rules. Does that make sense? And
Yes. Yeah.
and that's what makes it hard. And Lucy's saying, if you just give yourself over, that's actually easier. It's really hard to keep perfectly all the rules.
Is that where humility becomes a positive thing?
Yeah.
The thing that's so fascinating about, well, you mentioned humility. Let me say humility. One of the fascinating things about humility, but one of the fascinating things about the way I believe, and let me not preach to you, but preach to me. One of the things that I find so fascinating about what God has done for me is to take life, which I think I would begin by saying I think is pretty complicated. We're faced with a lot of complicated issues in our lives every day. And God summarized them real succinctly. Love me and take care of my world, and love the person next to you. That's all you've got to do. And in the end, every single moment that I face, if I simply take those two rules, I can answer any question that I'm challenged with. The problem is I don't want to do some of the stuff that I know that I ought to do to take care of my partner, take care of my friend. I see what it would mean to love them. If I really love them, I would do this. But darn, I don't want to do that because I want to go over here and do something else. But
and Carl, when you stumble and fail, it's okay.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That is exactly right. And she, the Creator, is going to love me just as much. But the whisper that I hear, the little pale voice, the little quiet voice that I hear in my ear is that what you should have done? And I hear that voice. Now, Margaret Scalise, the Reverend Dr. Margaret Scalise, who is an Episcopal priest and coincidentally a psychiatrist, when I said to her, Margaret, am I talking to God? Am I talking to the Holy Spirit? Or am I talking to my conscience? And you all have heard this before, so you know what her answer was. Does it matter?
Or yes. Answer's yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
The answer was yes.
Yes.
So that's all of that to me. What God has made, thanks be to God, has made it simple for me, is to say the rules are real simple. Just love each other, take care of each other in every way. No exceptions, no fine print, No exception clause down at the bottom.
And
Just
it's
love each
okay.
other.
It's okay to be detailed and be attentive. I
Yeah.
mean, God's not saying you don't have to worry about stuff or care.
Right.
You do.
And no, as Tom's point is a wonderful point. We're going to make so many mistakes. And fortunately, my old chemistry teacher took that one and put it to bed when he said, we climb the ladder of success wrong by wrong. The fact is, if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
You know, so you've got to be afraid. You've got to not be afraid to make mistakes, but make them for the right reasons. Make them for the right reasons. And I would pick on a dear friend and say that as a healthcare provider, that dear friend has made mistakes with important people. But the bottom line is that they made mistakes, but they knew that they were doing what they were trying to love on them, but they made a mistake. And then they realized that was okay, that life goes on. We make mistakes with the people that we love the most.
Yeah. And making mistakes is part of the thing. Is progress.
Yeah. But I think he loves us. You know, Keith Sloan said it best. I can see him standing there and he's preaching on God. And he says, you know, he loves you more than your mama. He loves you more than anything that you can imagine. And so why not ask for help all the time, at every moment? And I believe he's hard at work with everyone.
Before you leave that last slide, Tom, I think that because I like to hang on to something and repeat it sort of and let it roll over in my mind. But I have not come to torment your natural self, but to kill it. Mm-hmm. It sounds like a scary thing to embrace, yet a freeing thing. Mm-hmm. To embrace at the same time. And I think to me, it would be worth a lot of thought.
Yeah.
How do we kill it? How do we give up our natural selves? Because honestly, I doubt we really know how to do that.
Right. God does. I think you said it earlier. It's like it's really God that does it. God does the pretending. God does the killing of the things that need killing.
Mm-hmm. Kat, are you relating that to false self?
Well, it said natural self. Is that our false self?
Yeah.
No,
yes. I think he's using natural self to be the same thing as our ego.
Yeah, the part of you that's competitive, that's always has to do better than the other, the part of you that's competing against some impossible set of standards.
Right.
Hand over the whole natural self, all the desires which you think innocent, as well as the ones you think wicked. The whole outfit. I will give you a new self instead. In fact, I will give you myself. My own will shall become yours. Can we do that?
Absolutely. It's not easy. It isn't easy. But we can all do it.
And it's
and
the promise.
Do it one moment, you'll do it 1 minute, and then the next minute you'll turn around and you'll fall down.
Lewis would say it's the promise of Jesus Christ. It's what Christians agree with. Christ can give you a new self.
Tom, one of the things that you began this evening with, which I thought was wonderful, was this question of how many sons does he have? How many prophets are there? How many people does he have speaking on his behalf, on her behalf? And I think that in the end, it's an infinite number. And where it says, I will give you myself, I've got to be open to listen. And I'm going to go around the room here. I've got to listen to Kat and Wesley and Tom and Alice and Annette and Linton and Mary and Victoria and 53366, who I'm not, and Lucy and Katie.
It might be
all of
Beth.
you speak for him at one time or another. I know you do. I know you do.
Mhm.
So that other question you asked that I thought was wonderful, is it easy or hard to be a Christian?
Right.
And my answer is yes,
Yeah.
it is.
The trick
But it's
question.
full of joy.
Yeah. This is really funny, I think. When Jesus said, be perfect, he meant it. You know, there's some scripture that says, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. He meant it. He meant we must go in for the full treatment. It is hard, but the sort of compromise we're all hankering after is harder. In fact, it is impossible. It may be hard for an egg to turn into a bird. It would be a jolly slight harder for it to learn to fly while still remaining an egg. We are like eggs at present, and we cannot go on indefinitely being just ordinary, decent eggs. We must be hatched or go bad. That was just, you got a kind of kick out of that analogy.
I like that too.
That's
I was
classic.
just reminded that our phone visitor is Beth. And Beth, I love you and thank you for being there. And I'm sorry I called you a number.
That's perfectly okay. I'm taking every word in tonight. This is so interesting. It really
Yeah.
is.
Well, we're glad you're here.
The mini
Well, I'm
Christ.
glad you're all here.
Yeah. Thanks, Beth. I
Thank you.
get something, one analogy I also remember. We used to do a thing with the youth group, and we used to get 30 kids, youth group kids, in a dark room. I mean, you couldn't see anything. And we talked about the dark. Then we lit one candle and we put it in the middle. And then we talked about that. And that one candle in the middle of the room, every face could be seen by everybody. It's one candle. And then we took the candles and we each dipped our own candle in that candle. Well, that was one light that multiplied many times. It didn't have to be, everyone didn't have to be carrying around some separate thing. That it's like the Christ is in us. That candle light that we have is Christ in us. It's the one, the same, the only begotten, always existing Christ can be in you. And I get from this chapter, that's what we are supposed to believe. And I think I see it in people that I know that are wonderful, loving Christians. And I just love that analogy too. I like the egg one too. What do you think? This is
Tom,
the last slide, so we're almost done. What were you gonna say, Carl?
well, I was just going to say that we live now in a very challenging time for a whole lot of reasons. And I had two grandchildren here, along with my son, for the last week or so. And they are both really, really bright. One of them is extraordinarily loquacious. My mama would have said she talks a lot. And we don't always agree, she and I. And I try real, real hard to just listen. And y'all can imagine how hard that is for me. And I just let her talk because I think she needs to establish who she is and what she believes. And then, but she'll say something that it's like the bird, ordinary egg and decent egg. She'll say something and I'll think, I need to respond to that. And I'll try to figure out what it is that I feel like I need to respond to. And basically what she made a statement the other night that was all encompassing. All these folks are just bad, bad folks. I said, be real careful about using a broad brush. And that's all I said. Just be careful about using a broad brush. And she later on, in fact, well, it wasn't last night, night before, later on, she came back and she approached me privately and she said, Granddad, thank you. Because there are some good folks in that group, which I had painted with that same brush. The whole point is that we all do that all the time. We
Yeah.
grab something that we really believe in and we turn it into something not good. We overuse it. We overbear it. Kat's going to, I'm interrupting her now. I'm sorry.
No, you're not interrupting. For some reason, we just got kicked off. Y'all might can see us, but we can't see us anymore.
You're there.
You're
We
there.
can hear you and see you.
Mary got kicked off too. I don't know what's going on, but
Yeah, we're post attendees now.
uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Well,
Don't go
that's
away. You're there.
so that's the last slide. Thank you for all the commentary. If anyone has anything else, I put comments or questions from anything tonight. Next week will be the last week, week 10, the last 3 chapters of the book, Counting the Cost. We kind of talked a little bit about that. Nice people or new men? And he does mean new people. New men, and then the last chapter, the new men, and I added women because it's just not inclusive language.
He was just born in a different time.
Yeah,
That's
he
right.
means everybody, I promise you.
Sure he does. Sure he does.
So any other closing comments? I think
Thank
we're
you, Tom.
at the end of the
Thank you.
hour.
Yeah, thanks for
welcome.
doing this on your vacation, Tom. My goodness.
Yeah, it
know
was,
it.
it was
Wow.
nice. Yeah,
So much.
yeah. We made.
Are we going to
yeah.
spend some time next week just kind of talking about the what if future of doing this again with another
Sure.
CS book or something? Is there time for that maybe or no?
Yes, I think, or we'll make time. I'll try and truncate. So it's so hard. I mean, I tell you, my book is just, the whole thing is highlighted. So finding a paragraph to put on the slides is not easy, but it's fun. I think it's fun. But yes, we'll talk about it. And I think there's all kinds of possibilities we could have, and some in person. I like to do, even if we did a Zoom class, it'd be kind of fun to do once a month at someone's house or something like that.
Although the time change.
Although there's a time change, we'd have to work out the
distance for
details,
one
but
thing.
yeah, some of you are far away. Anyways, yes, we can talk about new things to go on, but next week will be the last week. And so read it and enjoy. And
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Wonderful. Very well done.
Thanks, Tom. Blessings.
You're welcome. Blessings to y'all. Good night. I'm gonna
Good night.
Good night.
record.
Tom.